Republican background. He's a former Marine, retired colonel, retired Marine, a JAG. Moved his family to the Neuse River, which is a beautiful river in North Carolina, pristine, and then the hog factories came in and the river started to die. This dinoflagellate called Pfisteria started to appear. Rick was trying to operate a fishing business, and all of a sudden the fish were showing up dead with open sores on their sides, and the fishermen themselves were getting disoriented from the toxins being released by this protozoa. And Rick took it upon himself he went up in the air and saw these hog factories, and he's still fighting them. He works with the Waterkeeper Alliance, and they are successfully suing a chicken company, Purdue, and a chicken grower in Maryland, and they're suing some of the polluting hog farms down in North Carolina. My other two main characters are Helen Redout, who lives in the Yakima Valley of Washington, a cherry farmer, grandmother, and Karen Hudson, who lives in Elmwood, Illinois. All three sort of bedrock conservative Americans from small town, farmers, fishermen, not your typical environmental activists, but they have become leading national spokespeople against factory farming because they've learned firsthand what's happened. In Yakima Valley, because of the mega dairies, the nitrate levels in the drinking water, in the groundwater, are so high, EP, from the cow manure. There's so much cow manure being applied to the land, and the lagoons themselves tend to leak, that it's getting into the groundwater, contaminating people's wells. And nitrates can cause spontaneous abortions, diabetes, blue baby syndrome. It can aggravate autism symptoms, etc. And they are finding the levels are so high, the EPA now, they're telling people not only to not drink your well water, but don't even come in contact with your skin. Don't wash your hands with it. That's how contaminated it is. And of course, it's always the poorest people who suffer the most because they depend on well water.
Her home is covered in soot?
Well, it has been. It's covered in odors. I described the scene in the opening of the book. One summer night, she had the windows open and woke up, and she said it smelled like 1,000 cows had crapped in her bed. And I hear this story over and over and over again, and that odor is unforgettable. And people run around trying to close all the windows in their house, but of course then you just end up trapping the odor in it. And the odor was the #1 problem everywhere I went, and it smells terrible, and it's completely unpredictable. You have these clouds of hydrogen sulfide and methane and ammonia sort of blowing around, and if it blows in your direction, you may be outside on a summer day with your laundry, having a lunch outside, and you have to literally pick everything up and run inside. It's the unpredictability of the odors. But when I came back from Yakima Valley, I went there 2 times, and also in the Central Valley of California, I came back with what they call manure flu, from just breathing in this stuff and the viruses and bacteria that's contained in it. You get a mild fever, achy chills, and it's really...
How consolidated is the farm industry in this country?
Highly consolidated. I would say chickens were the first to become consolidated, and virtually every chicken you buy in the store comes from a factory farm. Now we have the egg industry. In the 80s and 90s, the hog industry became consolidated. Dairy industry has now largely become consolidated with big exceptions. There's still pasture-fed dairies, particularly in Wisconsin and Vermont. The beef industry is the least consolidated. Most beef growers are still independent operators who raise their cattle out on range, on pasture, but then for the last 2 or 3 months of their lives, those cattle are sent to feedlots, which are essentially factory farms.
And now we have this latest news. Zemco Industries in Buffalo, New York, has recalled approximately 380,000 pounds of deli meat that may be contaminated with bacteria that can cause a potentially fatal disease. The products were distributed to Walmarts nationwide. The meats may be contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes, which was discovered in a retail sample that was collected by inspectors in Georgia.
Yeah, that to me sounds more like a problem of processing than production, but processing is such a big key part of this story. I mentioned if we reduce antibiotic use in these factory farms, if we reduce the amount of subsidies they were getting, it would level the playing field between the big operators and the small operators. It's the processing plants that are the final blockade. We have so few of them now that it's harder for independent producers to get their products to market. But the other problem is because we have so few processing plants and they're so huge that when you have a contamination issue like this, then all of a sudden tons, hundreds of thousands of tons of food is contaminated.
Finally, farmers markets, community farms, family farms, do they stand a chance now? Describe the movement.
Well, from what I understand, you can't find fresh eggs at the farmers market anymore. People are lining up to buy them. So this type of story only feeds demand for those things. Yes, of course they can. And if we allow those operators, again, if we share some of these tax subsidies with them, if we ban antibiotics, if we create more processing plants so smaller producers can get into the market and get their product to market, that will level the playing field. That means we can bring prices of the smaller produced items down. It may mean that the cheap stuff comes up a little bit and it levels the playing field. So there's great hope for independent producers.
David Kirby, I want to thank you for being with us. Animal Factory is his book, The Looming Threat of Industrial Pig Dairy and Poultry Farms on Humans and the Environment. When we come back, we'll look at the global picture of corporate versus community farms, and then we're going to look at this precedent-setting federal court decision that bans federal funding for embryonic stem cell research. Stay with us.